Rudy's Revelation.
This is all a conspiracy. This is all a conspiracy. Don't you know that it's a conspiracy
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast, or if you're joining me for the first time, welcome to the podcast. It is July 2nd, 2024. Well, today, of course, we're going to be talking about the Trump immunity ruling, which should be no surprise, and the continued Democratic freakout, not only over the Supreme Court ruling, but also over Joe Biden's performance. What are they going to do? What's going to happen between now and the election? What about Kamala Harris? That question nobody seems to be able to answer. Excuse me. Just want to remind you to engage the channel, please. Like and subscribe. Click that notification icon. And leave a comment, give me a thumbs up. All right, let's get into the news. All right, first up is, this is just from Maryland Matters, but they are headlines everywhere. Presidential immunity covers some official acts, Supreme Court rules, and Trump case. And, oh my God, I have this problem again. So, and then the New York Times reports immunity ruling escalates long rise of presidential power beyond Donald J. Trump. The decision adds to the seemingly one-way ratchet of executive authority. And this is why I'm going to run through a lot of the headlines. There are a lot of headlines to get through today, so I'm not going to drill down into every single story because you're going to get the gist. But the thing with this New York Times article is they're correct in a lot of instances because the establishment, the powers that be, the elite, whatever you want to call them, the swamp, the deep state, have been adding to executive authority over the years purposefully so they could have an end around Congress. They could use executive action and do what they like. The problem is when a populist like Trump gets elected, then we're going to have some issues for sure. And that's why they don't want him to get elected, not because he's untrustworthy or all these terrible things they say about him. That's not the case at all. The case is, as a matter of fact, is because they vested so much power in the executive because they always figured they could shoo in their guy, that he would act more like a dictator. Unfortunately, a populist got in with Donald Trump in 2016, particularly because he was too popular and he beat the cheat. And their cheat at the time was vote padding, which is basically you add a bunch of extra votes. The problem is if you don't know how many votes your opponent is getting, that pad might be overwhelmed by a majority of populist votes. So in 2020, they brought on COVID, and we're going to have some discussion about that pandemic, the situation there. But they brought in the pandemic, and they bring in Joe Biden, and they made it. They made the cheat foolproof, basically, because you can add as many ballots. So you have physical ballots. That doesn't matter if you order a recount, that people are going to recount illegitimate ballots. So that's why they want to keep out Trump, because they vested so much power in the executive. Now let's talk about the immunity case in general. I commented several times online about this, and I talked about it at length. The U.S. president always had immunity from pedestrian criminal prosecution, which means you just can't bring a case against a sitting president or a president after, a former president for acts he committed while in office, because he is immune, because you can't start bringing cases for a president for things he did. Oh, I don't like that he bombed a country, or I don't like that he did this or that, the other thing. because you basically have a single prosecutor being able to sully a president, former president, sitting president, what have you. The only legal recourse against the sitting president you have is impeachment, which has to be brought about by the legislative branch. So you can remove him from office for high crimes and misdemeanors. So felonies and misdemeanors, high crimes and misdemeanors. You can remove him from office. That's all you can do. So he can no longer commit crimes, presumably, while in the seat of the presidency. The only other legal recourse is treason, and the penalty for treason is death. So if a president does things that are against the will of the people or the country or undermine national security by certain acts, then he could be held for treason and he could be executed. Those are the two avenues of prosecuting criminality, perceived criminality by a U.S. president. Can you prosecute him after he leaves office? Perhaps, if you found out that he killed one of the servants in the White House or something, and then there's an investigation, of course. But actually for acts of presidents, official acts, they say even some official acts could be, if they're found to be criminal in the case of, it would have to be divined on a case-by-case basis. Okay, let's move on. So the Washington Post reports Justice Sotomayor, in her dissent in the 6-3 ruling, was the president is now a king above the law. That's not the case. We didn't want to have a king. We want to have a president. And by the way, we don't have a prime minister, which means first minister to the King of England or Queen of England. That's what prime minister means. So any country that has a prime minister is actually beholden to the realm of the British realm. If you did not know that, we have a president. And so if you have a president, you immediately, it's republicanism. You're against monarchy. So we do not have a king that is above the law. That's not the point. Not everybody is above the law, but the person that has the most immunity from prosecution is actually the U.S. President of the United States, because otherwise he'd be restrained from acting for fear of criminal prosecution. It's the same thing with a police officer. That's why they have to have some immunity, because otherwise they're going to be hamstringed. Going back to this article, she says, extraordinary rule has no basis in law. That's not true. It absolutely does. With fear for our democracy, I dissent, she says. She's an idiot and a progressive and an activist. The fact is like the president of the United States has immunity while acting as president from, and I say pedestrian because I mean this kind of like, oh, we're going to prosecute Trump for a cobbled together case about, not whether he paid hush money. That's fine. That's legal to do. It's called non-disclosure. But that somehow he violated campaign finance laws while president. So he had already been elected. So that can't even become the case. This is the reason that it's pedestrian, a municipal, not even a state prosecutor, not even a federal prosecutor, a municipal prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, decides that that in a partisan fashion, he wants to bring a case against a former president who happens to be running for office again. That's election interference. And that's why, for something that he did in office, it poses many, 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 many problems. And we're going to talk about this in just a second. We're going to get to a few more articles here. Associated Press is reporting Trump seeks to set aside his New York hush money guilty verdict after Supreme Court immunity ruling. We don't have to talk much about this. I think he has a basis. And of course he has a basis. Not to mention that he hasn't even gone through his appeal yet for that. And it's not hush money guilty. He's not guilty of paying hush money that's legal to do. It is a campaign finance law that is connected to any other law. And this is how the jury ruled, is that in any other ruling, if somehow Merchant said, if you can connect a crime, any crime, with this campaign finance law, that he's guilty. It was a cobbled together case. He has grounds for not only for appeal, but to have the case thrown out because of the immunity. It happened while he was president. Moving on, New York Times again, Trump amplifies calls to jail top elected officials, invokes military tribunals. A post that Mr. Trump circulated on Sunday called for Liz Cheney to be prosecuted by a military court reserved for enemy combatants and war criminals. And I'll just go into the article here. Donald Trump, over the week, escalated his vows to prosecute his political opponent, circulating posts on social media, website invoking televised military tribunals, and calling for a jail of the president, vice president, Senators Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, former Vice President Mike Pence. And these are all taken out of context, mind you. One of the posts circulated on Sunday night singled out Liz Cheney, former Wyoming congressman who is a Republican critic of Donald Trump, called her out to be prosecuted by a type of military court reserved for enemy combatants and war criminals. Elizabeth Lynn Cheney is guilty of treason. The post said, read truth if you want televised military tribunals. They should be going to jail on Monday, and not Steve Bannon. So if you looked at the text here, you would see that these quotes were taken out of context. When you see a little quote taken out of context, why didn't they show the complete truth post? Is post on Truth Social. If you look at the post, it says emphatically it was about Steve Bannon, and he said that they are so many other people that from his perception deserve to go to jail, not Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon is being sent to jail because he refused a subpoena from the January 6th committee where Liz Cheney was sitting. So, and the January 6th committee also destroyed all their evidence when they disbanded the committee. Why would they do such things? This is the reason. That's a public record. That act was actually illegal. And all the people that sat on the January 6th committee committed treason. And that's the whole context of the quote, was those people should be going to prison, not Steve Bannon, because they destroyed all the evidence. What testimony could he have given? And there are other people that also refused subpoenas, like Hunter Biden. But that goes beyond the case at this point. So again, the New York Times takes things out of context and tries to say that he's calling for military tribunals of his political opponents. Not really. And it was just a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Moving on to other headlines. UK Express BBC presenter sparks fury after calling for Donald Trump to be murdered by Joe Biden. Well-known Radio 4 presenter appeared to breach the BBC rules on social media impartiality today with a controversial tweet about the U.S. election. It's not about the U.S. election. It was about the immunity case, and saying, that in that case, it went along the lines of this Navy SEAL Team 6 can go out and murder people if you're the president, and you won't be held accountable. Well, if they're not on American soil, presidents do have the right to order those sorts of assassinations. Because Donald Trump did basically assassinate Soleimani. It was a targeted military strike against an enemy combatant. Can be debated, certainly. CBS News, increasing number of voters don't think Biden should be running for running for president after debate with Trump. That's a CBS News poll. AP, a private call of top Democrats fuels more insider anger about Biden's debate performance. Opinion poll. Where is this? I'm not sure where this is from John Bolton, of all people. The Democrats are panicking. Biden could bring down the whole party. He could, absolutely. And that's what a lot of politicians, Democrats, party officials are worried about. They're not just worried about Joe losing to Donald Trump, which of course everybody is in a tizzy about because Trump is Hitler. The Democrats are panicking because they're afraid that it's going to affect down ballot races as well, which it should. The most starking realization from the debate is not only is Joe Biden senile or have mental acuity problems, is that it brings in stark relief that the news media, Democrats, liberals, all these people have been lying forever. Lying forever about, not only about Joe Biden, about his ability, is about the fact that he could have ever been elected in 2020. He never had that much support to overcome the support by Donald Trump, which had more support than in 2016, and Donald Trump has even more support now, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact that the news media, the Biden administration have been lying. So why should anybody listen to mainstream media, listen to the Biden administration, listen to Karine Jean-Pierre, listen to Joe Scarborough, listen to any Democratic or progressive pundit, whether it's Wes Moore or Chuck Schumer or whomever, or Joe Biden for that matter. Moving on, Bob Woodward brands Biden's debate performance a political H-bomb. His performance was so bad, so awful, political hydrogen bomb. That's what Bob Woodward said, and then we're going to his former colleague here. And so these are the Washington Post reporters which were set upon Richard Nixon. Well, I'm not going to digress into Watergate, but Biden had 15 to 20 episodes of cognitive decline in last year, Carl Bernstein says. Well, we all said, and we all saw. He is not the man he was 4 years ago. He is not the man he was 2 years ago. He is not the man he was 1 year ago. He's not even the man he was 6 months ago. There is a steady, significant decline, and many people, like I, suspect that he was thrown under the bus in the debate purposely, because it was strange that they set the debate so early and they made these rules. The Democrats made these rules. The Biden administration made these rules, called for these rules, where he would be out without a lifeline, no teleprompter, no notes, and probably no Adderall. So how could he possibly function? But when he's not juiced up on Adderall or amphetamine, whatever it is, that he can't function. They give him a shot of Adderall or whatever. Sean Hannity calls it Red Bull. I mean, it's not. It's obviously something, some pharmaceutically strong intoxicant. That's Joe Biden. So they'll give him a shot of that. He'll go out and read the teleprompter. He'll like, and then he'll read the teleprompter. He's a robot. He could look at notes and he could, but he never asks questions. He never has long, in-depth press conferences. He has been hidden and sheltered. Many articles have said this, hidden and sheltered from the news media and from the public for some time. You got to excuse me today. I really had my sinus infection. I have another sinus infection now that I fight these things off on occasion, and having too much fun so far this summer. And so it came back and I had to sleep late. I haven't been getting a lot of sleep, and that's a story for another time, but stay with me. Okay. So moving on to the headlines from the New York Times: Middle East crisis. Biden's debate performance raises alarm in Israel because they're worried about support going to Israel. Politico: Democrat-leaning voters less likely to choose Biden after debate, survey finds, but they're not necessarily flocking to Trump, which the polls show. Politico again, the media establishment lays on the horn. Joe must go. Calls for President Biden to step aside after poor debate. Give new life to old resentments. USA Today, influential donors want to pressure Biden to drop out. And the most important one here, the New York Post, Jill Biden's Vogue cover proves how painfully out of touch the president family is. Now, everybody is suggesting that Jill Biden, Joe's caretaker, is the one that is resisting calls for Joe Biden to drop out of the presidential race because this is their key to power. They don't want this to end. He's been in politics for 50 years. They'd enjoyed the power it gives them. And plus, the influence peddling they've been engaged in for some time, decades, is all going to go away. It's just like the Clintons became a lot less wealthy when they left office. The Clinton Foundation used to take in millions of dollars, billions really, and then when they left office, all that money flowing in to that pay-for-play scheme that the Clintons had arranged. Basically, it was a computer dead drop. They'd put money into the Clinton Foundation. Hillary Clinton would put classified material on her server in her bathroom at her home in Chappaqua, and then hackers were able to pick it up. So moving on to this story from the New York Post here. And then there's Vogue, which literally couldn't stop the press as the fashion Bible turned Dem PR machine was already rolling out its July issue with cover model Jill Biden in a silk cream Ralph Lauren dress that retails for $5,000. The magazine landed on the internet Monday morning with a resounding, wincing thud. It was tone deaf. It was tacky. But this shoot and interview conducted months ago would have been messy even if the debate disaster never happened. And I'll just show you a picture for those who are watching. There's Jill Biden all dressed up in her Ralph Lauren. And people have to understand also is that the car crash that killed Joe Biden's former wife and child was suspect because then he slid right into this relationship with a much prettier and younger woman, Jill Biden, who he went on to have a family with, et cetera, et cetera. Moving on to the headlines, though, from CNN, we will continue to fight. First Lady Jill Biden is Vogue's latest cover star. And then Naomi Wolf, the author, writes, is this sociopathic woman who is ignoring her injured husband actually running the U.S.? That is funny. And Democrats, this from Newsweek, and Democrats have a Kamala Harris problem if Biden drops out, without a doubt. What we see here is Kamala Harris, who polled. See, this is the problem. It's like in a parliamentary system, if you have to do power sharing, you have to cobble together a government with the next most successful political politician. So, but instead of doing that, Joe Biden picked a DEI hire in Kamala Harris, who was polling at less than 2%. So she's not very popular, and she sucks. And so what are they going to do? My theory is Joe Biden's going to go by hook or by crook. So he either drops out or his life is in danger. He could have some sort of episode. Who knows what's going to happen? But if he doesn't drop out, he's either going to get challenged at the convention, which is because the problem is to sidestep Kamala Harris. That's the problem. But if Joe Biden is taken out, Kamala Harris could be figuratively the figurehead, the first woman president for a few months. She wouldn't have to top a re-election ticket. They could put in someone else. It could all work out that way. It was shrewd on Biden, however, to pick someone so unpopular that they would never want to get rid of him because they don't want Kamala Harris. Going back to this Newsweek article, though, as calls mount for President Joe Biden to drop out of the presidential race following a shaky debate performance. Shaky. Speculation has turned to who would be the best person to replace him. And that person, it seems clear voice, Vice President Kamala Harris, is not grabbing Democrats' attention and concerns over her polling figures. Indeed. Many of the Democrat speculators have been quick to overlook her, citing her poor polling, instead turn their attention to people like Gavin Newsom. Others, however, disagree with this position, citing Harris's role in second in command as an overriding factor. The whole point of being vice president means you're second in line. And that's if Kamala Harris isn't qualified, then why has she been our vice president for 3.5 years? That makes no sense. Well, it does make sense because I just explained it, that it's shrewd political working by the Biden family, because there'd be less call to try to push him out, 25th Amendment him, if they knew someone less qualified than a doddering old fool, and we have that in Kamala Harris, they wouldn't try to push him out, and they haven't. And now they're stuck with this quandary, and it was probably Jill Biden, and Joe Biden knew they would come to this day where the Democrats would want to get rid of Joe, and here they have, as the backup quarterback, so to speak, Kamala Harris, who is less liked, and nobody wants her for president, even Democrats. So that leads us to this Wall Street Journal article, why Kamala Harris wouldn't be Biden's likeliest replacement. If the president ends his re-election bid, his vice president would be the clear front runner to lead the Democratic ticket. Her own political despite her own political weaknesses. Indeed, she sucks. She has a lot of political weaknesses. But as I said, this is Joe Biden's political move that for election purposes, the DEI, everybody applauded. Oh, hooray, a first woman, black, but she's a moron. So you don't want someone who's senile running the country, and you don't want a moron running the country, even though it is unlikely that either of these people are or would be running the country. There is a cabal of inner workings of Democrats that is more of, I would cite it as, and if you've ever heard me talk about politics, the political spectrum, councilism, which is you are governed by a council, a Politburo, so to speak, star chamber of unelected individuals who sit in council, and they decide what's going to be done. And then you would have a figurehead in a political system like ours. You'd have a figurehead that's just there, and the council basically tells them what to do. They load the teleprompter, and the guy's up there just reading. It is, in fact, figuratively, not literally, the Wizard of Oz, where the people have now seen the curtain pulled back, and they understand that it is a council of perhaps Obama officials or other Democrats that are actually forming and executing policy, and not Joe Biden whatsoever. Even so, though, the Bidens don't want to give up their graft that they got going here, the grift, where the political, it doesn't matter how much Joe Biden has to work. He's not really working. They put a lid on him at like 10 a.m. He has to do one thing a day, and he can't really do that at all, and he's shielded from the public. So let's move on, because I'm already getting a little verbose here. At Fox News, Kamala Harris roasted for BET Awards cameo, toenail curling level of cringe. And the vice president was accused of pandering with her taped cameo appearance during the Black Entertainment Television Awards on Sunday night that conservatives and critics mocked as toenail curling cringe. Basically, she was set up by this guy, Taraji Henson, calling Harris on the video to discuss an upcoming presidential election between Biden and Trump. Out here in these streets reference at a recent rap song. The point being is that she, it was a taped thing, and she was supposed to be like calling in live, and that's not really what it was. And what she said was, yeah, girl. Oh, it wasn't. Taraji is not a guy. It's a girl. Yeah, girl, I'm out here in the streets, Kamala said. And let me tell you, you're right, Taraji. there's so much at stake in this moment. The majority of us believe in freedom and equality, including me and most Republicans. But these extremists, as they say, they're not like us, Harris said, using a nod to the rapper Kendrick Lamar's popular song, "They're Not Like Us." What are you talking about? The fact is the people that support the Constitution, the populists, the libertarians, are all about freedom and equality. I'm all for equality. I'm not for equity of outcome. I'm for equality. I think all the rights that are outlined in the Constitution, individual liberties that are outlined in the Constitution, apply to everybody. And those are what provide freedom for you, are those individual liberties that are laid out in the Constitution. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution that basically are a bulwark against mob rule and democracy itself. If you know what democracy is, it's the power of the ballot. It's not some crazy thing. It just means that everybody, one man, one vote. Okay, moving on to other headlines here before I get too mired in all that. Daily Mail, new app is slammed for allowing users to creepily spy on popular nightclubs across major city using hidden cameras. More surveillance. See, that's the point, is when people are all distracted with, "Hey girl, I'm out here in the streets fighting for freedom and equality." No, you're not. Because freedom means freedom from surveillance, which is the Fourth Amendment, to be secure in your effects and your person. And then the next surveillance news we got coming up, also from the Daily Mail, how your FedEx driver is helping cops spy on you. And I'll just get into the article here. FedEx is using AI-powered cameras installed on its trucks to help aid police investigations. Popular postal firm is partnered with a $4 billion surveillance startup based in Georgia called Flock Safety. Flock specializes in automated license plate readers and video surveillance. 40,000 cameras spanning 4,000 cities across 40 states. FedEx has teamed up with the company to monitor its facilities. It's led critics to liken the move to rolling out mass surveillance network. It indeed is. It's just another spy hub. It's the same thing why people don't like the Google Street View, is because it literally spies on you. And there is so much surveillance going on against you. You got to be really careful. You got to tape over your cameras and be very wary of putting surveillance in your home, listening devices. Your phone is always on listening. Got to be very careful. We're not really free in our effects in our person. So if you're talking about freedom and equality, you have to talk about that liberty of being free from surveillance. So moving to Europe really quick, AP at 28, Jordan Bardella could be the youngest French prime minister at helm of far-right National Party. Good. There, if you know anything about politics, it's called the pendulum. It swings back and forth. What happens is a political party gets too much weight behind it, and it pushes the pendulum too far. And then when it swings back as a counter movement, you get a little too far in the other direction. Most Americans are centrist or moderate. They understand the both sides. And so the pendulum should swing a little more in the middle. But this is the problem with progressives. When you push too far to the left, you're going to have a counterbalance of it swinging too far to the right. And to be honest, I'm all for that, because in this particular movement, National Rally and other conservative movements across the globe, it's against immigration. And why? Is because that's a threat to national sovereignty. In Europe, you have the problem of the EU, which is a supranational organization that dictates how countries can and should behave, particularly with national national laws, and those national laws mostly deal with border security and diplomacy. Washington Post is reporting New Zealand, once a utopia for Trump-weary exiles, turns to the right. Of course, as I mentioned, this is a global phenomenon because of the swing so far to the left. People inherently vote opposite because they see with the trouble Lucinda Ardern brought. Ladern, or whatever her friggin' name is. The country is now led by a coalition of center-right, libertarian, and populist lawmakers who have formed its most conservative government in decades. This is the sharpest political swing in a generation. The coalition is the most conservatives I've seen in 30-odd years, says Janet Wilson, political commenter. The sudden shift has caused some American expats, including Jamie Pomeroy and her husband, both of their mid-30s, moved to Queenstown from Boulder, Colorado in September, a month before the election. And they were motivated in part by Ardern's, Lucinda Ardern is her name. I always get her name wrong. Who's moved to ban semiotic weapons after the Christ Church thing. But Lucinda Ardern was an authoritarian during COVID, and that's why she was voted out of office. I think she chose to leave, but she was one of the worst globally. She was right up there with Justin Trudeau. I mean, she was bad. Out of all the authoritarians and quote-unquote democratic societies, she was one of the worst. All right, more news. The Wall Street Journal. Mini strokes, gut problems. Scientists see links to an old bout of COVID. We don't know. If you've been vaccinated, we don't know. If it is COVID, we don't know. My thing, it was a dual vector thing. If you got vaccinated for COVID, it more than likely made your resistance to the virus lower. Your immunity actually got lower. That's a scientific fact. If you had any defense through vaccination, it only lasted a couple months. So it was a two-vector thing. Either the vax made you more easily get infected, or you got infected and you weren't vaccinated. But the infection, the vaccination, all these things apparently, and is proven, is lowering life expectancy and is causing major disease and chronic health issues, without a doubt. More from the Wall Street Journal. Satellite images show expansion of suspected Chinese spy bases. There's more than one in Cuba. Analysts identified 4 electronic eavesdropping stations, including previously unreported site near U.S. naval base. Not surprising at all. This is the point I try to make with Russia's national security, is if you have NATO, Ukraine join NATO, the West would put eavesdropping spy bases right up against the Russian border and all around Crimea, even if Crimea wasn't part of any sort of settlement, but they would get listening and spy bases really close to one of Russia's most sensitive military bases, and that's their naval fleet in Black Sea and Sevastopol. So this isn't, we got Chinese spy bases right next to Guantanamo Bay. And nothing's being done to stop it. So, it's a tit for tat. We're in a very serious time here, because I don't know if the Chinese are going to wait till Joe Biden is out of office. They're certainly, if they're going to take Taiwan, they're going to do it before Trump would take office. So it'd probably be in the lame duck period between November and January. That's just my take on it. More news. The Telegraph, Western civilization is being destroyed by its own decadence. Similar phenomenon is at play in the West. We have built the most peaceful, most prosperous, most humane, most progressive civilization the world has ever known. After centuries of battle, physical, moral, and philosophical carnage and bloodshed, and now just 80 years after Auschwitz and 30-odd years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we are apparently bored out our hard-won liberty and stability. The zeitgeist of our current age is to smash things up while pretending to be a better world. That's progressivism. Only at some are beginning to find out what begins as performative theory of progressivism ends up as murder, mayhem, and misery. Indeed. This is what people don't understand, especially the younger generation. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Mankind for millennia fought for freedoms for the individual, fought for freedom, false prosecution, and all these things, and now we're throwing it all away for some pipe dream of some sort of racial, ethnic diversity and equity. I have no problems with equality, but we don't, and I have no problems with diversity. I'm the multiculti guy. I love multiculturalism. However, you cannot say, well, this has got to go. And that's the problem. Whether it's masculinity or white culture, if there even is such a thing, I don't consider it a thing. But let's just call it American culture. Maybe that was predominantly built by whites or Caucasians. I have no problem with American culture, but some people might because they read the 1619 Project, which is false history. Anyway, moving on. Fortune magazine, Gen Zers are so disillusioned with the economy that they think it's okay to commit fraud. In 2023, 42% of Gen Zers admitted a willingness to engage in first-party fraud where they dispute a purchase with their payment provider despite the purchase being legitimate. Significantly higher than other generations, and this goes on to say the data might seem sensational, but if we explore it more deeply, it is very telling. Academics have a theory called the fraud triangle, which argues that people are more inclined to commit fraud if they have incentive, rationalization, and opportunity. And that's the problem, too, with the black community, and I hate to put a racial tinge on this, but you have to be righteous. So saying I deserve to steal because of Whitey, or 1619 Project, or I deserve to steal because of slavery. Fraud is stealing. It's not burglary, but it's still stealing. So the problem is there is a moral decline with secularism, with humanism, is that you don't have to be religious, but you have to be righteous. What's right? What, you think stealing is right? If you, as they said here, have incentive, rationalization, or opportunity. It's reparation. It's not. You have to do what's right morally, which is you don't steal, you don't hurt, you don't kill, you don't lie for all intents and purposes, really bear false witness. You certainly don't cheat on an election because you think Trump is Hitler. You have to do what's right regardless of the outcome. That is indeed what the Christ told us. And that's a lesson that a lot of people don't want to learn, is that you yourself have to do what's right, regardless of the outcome. You can't, and that's why we have a problem in Eastern Europe where they look at bribery as not a moral failing, or in many other countries, you accept a bribe, that's not a moral failing, you're just trying to, feed your family and what have you. You have to do what's right. And if you can't succeed doing it that way, well, then you're cheating. More news, CBS News. Here's how much Americans say they need to earn to feel financially secure. They say it's $186,000 a year. Who the hell earns that? Only 6% of U.S. adults make that amount or more. The median family income falls between $51,000 and $86,000. In the latest federal data, achieving financial security means being able to pay your bills and having enough left over to make some discretionary purchases and put money away for the future, the personal financial site said. That's a lot. I don't know. I think me and my wife, don't make that much, certainly, but, we live modestly. We put money away for the future. We try to, but we also make investments that, increase in value. And so you have to be smart investment. And then you can't go, there's certain people, we don't live in a rich town, but they have this little teeny crappy house and then they're driving like a $90,000 car. It's like, whoa, what are you doing? So you have to be modest with your discretionary spending. And as any investment person will tell you, you have to diversify. If you're working hand to mouth, if all your paycheck is going to rent and food, and a little discretionary spending, then I understand that. I've been there. I've subsidized my income before with my credit card. So I've been there. But if you have a little, you should live modestly, have a little money left over so you could build wealth. That's the hardest thing people have to do. If you're not setting money aside or investing in something, you're not building wealth, and then you'll never be free. You'll be a debt slave forever. A few more articles here. Politico, we are confusing conservatism with anger and hate. Utah governor, Spencer Cox, doesn't want political opponents to hate each other. Yeah, people don't understand what republicanism is. People don't understand what conservatism is. The problem was the GOP was for a long time fronting for corporate America, which gave them a bad rap. But the thing with the right is, first of all, republicanism and conservatism is different. Conservatism just means you don't want your government to spend money. You want that money to be conserved so we can have lower taxes. Republicanism just means you're anti-monarchical, which you don't like monarchies really, but that you believe in the sense of the United States, that you're on the right, you believe in the constitutional individual liberties versus democratic mob rule. So it's more, republicanism in the United States is more concentrated on reserving the rights, and that's why it's labeled with conservatism or banded with conservatism, because the individual has to pay less taxes. He's more to rely on himself than rely on the federal government, where everybody has to pay in to support X, Y, and Z. But it's certainly, conservatism has nothing to do with hate. It just means you don't want to spend money. And problems, people look at that as being, oh, you're not sympathetic to the needs of the poor or whatever. No, I just don't want to pay more taxes. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a social safety net, and that splits me with a lot of conservatisms. I do, but I think it should be poor. I don't think people on welfare should have cable TV and be able to drive around in an Escalade. That's just, I think people should be provided for school, food, housing, clothing, but it should be poor, because then there's no incentive to get off the dole. All right. Last article here? No, two more articles. CNN, the world is sitting on $91 trillion problem. Hard choices are coming. The hard choices is what I just said. Conservatism was losing, and everybody was, flocking over to liberalism. And now we have a $91 trillion global debt problem. And now everybody's going back to conservatism because we're like, oh shit, that drunken spending spree, that wasn't too wise of us to do. And the last one here is, what is the most notorious, I think is this from the Free Press. What is the most notorious murder of a gay man? Wasn't a hate crime. A generation ago, Matthew Shepard was brutally murdered in what appeared to be a homophobic attack. This month, Ben Kawaler traveled to the scene of the crime. Here, a different story. This, I think, was in Wyoming. This was a long time ago, and everybody thought it was a gay hate crime. It wasn't. He was just murdered. Who knows? The evidence suggests that it wasn't a homophobic attack. And just today, it was like a mob descended on a lesbian couple and beat them up. And the headline makes it sound like it's a homophobic attack. I don't think it is. And you should have seen after Matthew Shepard, the headlines all over the place. America is full of hate, and it's the Republicans are running around killing gay people, or the Republicans want to take away gay rights or women's rights, or it's just lies. It's a bunch of lies, and I don't know. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, give me a thumbs up, click that notification. Visit my other website, libpop.org, learn about libertarian populism. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, around 10 a.m. I was about 10:30 today on Rumble. And remember, you're under attack biologically, psychologically. So stay hip to the trick. And I'll see you maybe tonight for Tuesdays with Perry. I haven't talked to him yet, so I might have an edition, episode 81 of Tuesdays with Perry tonight. Stay tuned on Rumble to see if we go live, usually around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. If not, I'll see you tomorrow. Respect.
You can't handle the truth.
They cheat.
Give me a gun.
Somebody please get this man a gun.
Let's go.